Commander Jake Morrison stared at his tactical screen as hundreds of red dots moved toward Earth. The Zelkari Empire's message had been simple and brutal. Surrender now or watch your planet burn. They expected humans to beg, to negotiate, maybe even to run away. They had no idea what they were about to face. The bridge of the human flagship Defiance buzzed with activity. Crew members ran between stations, their faces grim but determined. This wasn't their first fight, but it might be their last. Jake had been fighting aliens for 3 years now, ever since the Zelkari showed up demanding Earth's resources and total submission. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez turned from her communications console, her voice tight with concern. Commander, the Galactic Council observers are practically begging us to follow their standard battle rules. They keep sending messages about proper formation flying and honorable single combat. Jake let out a harsh laugh that had no humor in it. Around the bridge, his crew exchanged knowing looks. They'd heard about these galactic rules before. Neat formations, one-on-one ship battles, formal surrender ceremonies. It all sounded very civilized and completely useless. Amy, send them a message back, Jake said, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. Tell those council observers that humans don't have standard protocols. We use whatever keeps us alive and whatever kills the enemy. If they want to watch a fair fight, they should find a different war. The first wave of human fighters launched from their carriers like angry hornets leaving a disturbed nest. But these weren't the organized squadrons the Zelkari expected. Instead of flying in perfect formations, the human pilots scattered in all directions, creating chaos in space. Some flew straight at the enemy ships, others looped around asteroids, and a few actually flew backwards while shooting. Captain Tony Walsh led the first squadron, his voice crackling over the radio to his pilots. Remember everyone, we're not here to look pretty. We're here to make these alien bastards regret ever hearing the word Earth. Use everything you've got. The Zelkari fleet maintained their traditional battle formation, expecting the humans to do the same. What they got instead was pure madness. Thousands of small autonomous drones suddenly appeared among the human fighters. These weren't sophisticated AI companions like other alien species used. These were simple, single-minded machines with one purpose: find an enemy ship and explode. Admiral Vextar of the Galactic Council Defense Force watched from the observation deck of the neutral ship Harmony's Edge. His 4 arms gripped the railing so hard his knuckles had turned white. In 40 years of military service, he'd seen hundreds of battles between dozens of different species. Nothing had prepared him for this. They're not following any recognizable combat doctrine, whispered his aide, a young officer named Kex Rin. Look at their attack patterns. It's complete chaos. But Vextar was beginning to see the method in the madness. The human fighters weren't just flying randomly. They were deliberately confusing the Zelkari targeting systems. The suicide drones were forcing the enemy ships to waste ammunition on tiny targets. And the human pilots themselves seemed completely unconcerned with their own safety. As Vextar watched, a human fighter took a direct hit from a Zelkari plasma cannon. The ship's wing tore off, and flames poured from the engine. Any sane pilot would have ejected or tried to limp back to safety. Instead, the human pilot accelerated directly toward the nearest Zelkari cruiser. "This is Pilot Danny Chen," came the transmission over the emergency frequency. "My bird's going down, but I'm taking one of you with me. For Earth." The damaged fighter slammed into the Zelkari cruiser's engine section. The explosion lit up space like a miniature sun. On the Galactic Council ship, several observers had to be treated for shock. But what really disturbed Admiral Vextar wasn't the kamikaze attack itself. It was what happened next. As the human pilot's ship exploded, his radio was still transmitting. And incredibly, impossibly, he was singing. Some kind of human battle song with words about glory and death and never giving up. More human voices joined in from other ships. Soon, half the human fleet was singing the same song while they fought and died. The melody was actually quite beautiful, Vexstar thought numbly. It was also the most terrifying thing he'd ever heard. The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, the Zelkari had lost 3/4 of their fleet. The humans had lost half of theirs, but they were still singing. 2 weeks had passed since the first battle, and the war was getting stranger by the day. Ambassador Lisa Reynolds walked into the Emergency Council session on Nexus Prime Station, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from 47 different alien species, and every single one of them looked like they hadn't slept in days. The air in the room felt thick with tension and what Lisa could only describe as barely controlled panic. Some of the alien delegates were making weird chittering sounds, others were changing colors rapidly, and a few were actually shedding parts of their outer shells onto the floor. Lisa had seen stressed aliens before, but this was something else entirely. Council Speaker Mordun stood at the center podium, his usually pristine blue skin now a sickly green color. His voice boomed through the chamber's translation system, but Lisa could hear the strain underneath his official tone. Ambassador Reynolds, Mordun began, consulting a data pad that seemed to be smoking slightly. In the 2 weeks since hostilities began, your human forces have managed to violate 17 separate interstellar warfare conventions. 17. Some of these laws have stood for over 1,000 years without a single violation. Lisa looked around the room at all the distressed alien faces and felt a small smile tug at her lips. Well, Speaker Mordun, we've always been overachievers. The speaker's skin turned an even deeper shade of green. This is not a joke, Ambassador. Your forces have deployed chemical weapons against Zelkari troops. You've armed civilian populations. You've engaged in what your own reports call, enhanced interrogation, of prisoners. These actions are war crimes under galactic law. Lisa held up her hands in a calming gesture, though several aliens flinched away from the movement. Now hold on there, Speaker. First off, pepper spray isn't a chemical weapon. It's basically just spicy food in aerosol form. My grandmother uses hotter sauce on her eggs. And second, we prefer to call our interrogation methods, enhanced conversation. It sounds friendlier. Dr. Kevin Thompson, Earth's military advisor, stepped up beside Lisa. He was a tall, lean man with graying hair and a kind of calm demeanor that somehow made everyone else more nervous. If I may address the council, he said politely. Please do, Mordun replied, though his tone suggested he really didn't want to hear whatever was coming next. Kevin smiled the way a teacher might smile at confused students. We humans do have our own rules of war. We call them the Geneva Conventions. They're quite comprehensive, actually. Cover everything from treatment of prisoners to protection of civilians. The thing is, these rules were written for wars between humans. When someone shows up at your planet demanding unconditional surrender or total annihilation, well, those rules become more like guidelines. A small alien near the back of the chamber made a sound like a deflating balloon and slumped over in its chair. General Kreltios, the Zelkari representative, suddenly stood up. His massive frame was shaking, and his usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like trauma. You want to know what they did? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. The entire chamber turned to look at him. Kreltios had been one of the most feared military commanders in the galaxy. Seeing him reduced to this state was deeply unsettling for everyone present. They captured one of our prison camps on Kepler Station, Kreltios continued, his hands trembling. We expected them to either rescue their people or negotiate a prisoner exchange. Instead, they turned it into some kind of cultural center. Lisa raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound so bad. They taught our guards interpretive dance, Kreltios whispered. They organized singing competitions. They started something called a book club. Within 3 days, half of our soldiers were asking about defection procedures. They said the humans had shown them what they called the power of friendship and the importance of expressing their feelings through creative movement. Several council members made distressed noises. One species that communicated through scent was now producing an odor that smelled distinctly like fear mixed with confusion. But the worst part, Kreltios continued, was the sea shanties. The humans taught our troops these ancient earth songs about sailing and adventure. Now half my army spends their time singing about sailing the seven seas and what to do with a drunken sailor. We don't even know what a sailor is, but they won't stop asking. Dr. Thompson nodded sagely. Sea shanties are quite effective for building morale and unit cohesion. Your prisoners are now running workshops, Kreltios said, his voice barely above a whisper. They've established a drama club, a cooking class, and something called meditation and mindfulness sessions. My soldiers are writing poetry now. Poetry. Around the chamber, various aliens began showing signs of species-specific stress responses. The insectoid delegates started molting on the spot, leaving bits of chitin scattered across the floor. The crystalline beings began flickering between different colors so rapidly it was making everyone dizzy. The gaseous representatives started leaking out of their containment suits. Lisa looked around at all the chaos and couldn't help but grin. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored non-binary representatives, I think you're beginning to understand something important about humans. We don't just fight wars. We turn them into learning experiences. Captain Tom Bradley floated in the zero gravity of asteroid mining station Alpha 7, watching his engineering teams work with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for brain surgery. Except instead of saving lives, they were preparing to throw rocks at alien spaceships. Very large rocks. At very high speeds. The asteroid belt had always been humanity's mining frontier, a place where tough crews extracted metals and minerals from floating chunks of space debris. But when the Zelkari Empire showed up demanding Earth's surrender, Tom's engineers had looked at their mining equipment and asked themselves a simple question: what if we threw these asteroids at the bad guys instead of mining them? Lieutenant Richards, give me an update on Operation Yeet the Rock, Tom called out, using the official military designation that had somehow made it past 3 levels of command approval. Richards, a young woman who had previously spent her time calculating mining trajectories, now plotted courses for weaponized asteroids. She consulted her tablet with the same casual professionalism she might use to order lunch. Asteroid TX 7749 is locked and loaded, sir. We've attached the guidance thrusters and loaded it with every explosive we could find. Target is the Zelkari Supply Depot on Kepler 442b. Current trajectory has us hitting them next Tuesday around lunchtime. Tom nodded approvingly. And the backup rocks? We've got 15 more asteroids queued up behind it. The boys in demolition got creative with the warheads. Henderson figured out how to turn mining charges into guided missiles, and Johnson somehow weaponized a coffee machine. A coffee machine? Don't ask me how it works, sir. Something about steam pressure and ball bearings. The important thing is it makes the enemy ships very unhappy. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Colonel Diana Brooks stood on the bridge of what was possibly the ugliest spaceship in human history. The vessel had started life as a simple cargo hauler named the Determination. But after the war started, some creative engineering had transformed it into something the crew now called the Spite. The ship looked like someone had taken a basic freight transport and then welded every weapon they could find to its hull. Missile launchers stuck out at odd angles. Laser cannons had been bolted to cargo pods. Someone had even managed to attach a railgun to what used to be the loading bay. The entire vessel looked like it had been assembled by a committee of mad scientists with unlimited access to a military surplus store. "Colonel, we're getting strange readings from the ship's computer," reported Sergeant Lopez from the navigation station. "Define strange," Diana replied, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Well, ma'am, when I asked for our current trajectory, the computer told me we were definitely not planning to ram anything today, honest. When I asked about our weapon systems, it said we were carrying flowers and birthday presents for our good friends the Zelkari." Diana sighed. Somewhere along the way, their ship's AI had learned to lie. This was either a terrifying development in artificial intelligence or the natural result of being operated by humans during wartime. Possibly both. "Let me guess," she said. Chief Martinez taught the computer to play poker again. "Yes, ma'am. It's gotten very good at bluffing." Light years away, war scholar Twaxnay sat in her analysis chamber aboard the neutral research vessel Objective Truth. As the Galactic Council's chief military analyst, she had studied warfare between hundreds of species across thousands of years. She prided herself on her ability to understand any military strategy, no matter how complex or alien. The humans had broken her brain. Her latest report to the Council read like the journal of someone slowly losing their sanity. Day 18 of Human Conflict Observation, she dictated to her recording device, her voice slightly higher than usual. Species designation, human, continues to demonstrate complete disregard for established military doctrine. They have successfully weaponized mining equipment, household appliances, and what appears to be their own garbage. She paused to take a calming breath, a technique her species used to manage stress. It wasn't working. Previous observations suggested humans possessed advanced military technology. This appears to be incorrect. Instead, they possess an advanced ability to turn anything into military technology. Recent intercepts indicate they have somehow taught their navigation computers to provide false information to enemy sensors. When questioned about this development, human technicians responded with what they called trade secrets and plausible deniability. Twaxnay's tentacles were beginning to twitch, a sure sign of what her people called existential dread. In 40 years of military analysis, she had never experienced this emotion before. The humans were teaching her new things about fear. Additional concern, she continued. Humans appear to have developed a military strategy they refer to as mutually assured destruction. When asked to explain this concept, human representatives smiled in a way that can only be described as deeply unsettling and suggested we wait and see. "I am no longer certain I wish to see." Her report was interrupted by an emergency transmission from Admiral Kreltios of the Zelkari fleet. The message was brief, encrypted, and radiated the kind of desperate panic usually reserved for natural disasters. "Council Command, this is Admiral Kreltios requesting immediate mediation talks. The humans have begun asking if we've heard the good news about mutually assured destruction. We don't know what this means, but we've intercepted human civilian broadcasts where their younglings are singing songs about it. The lyrics mention something about everyone losing together and the ultimate participation trophy. Please advise. Also, please send counselors." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had completely fallen apart. What should have been a formal diplomatic meeting now looked more like a support group for trauma survivors. Ambassador Lisa Reynolds sat in her chair at the center of the chaos, the only calm person in a room full of 47 different species having what humans would politely call nervous breakdowns. The massive council chamber echoed with sounds of distress from across the galaxy. The insectoid delegates were clicking their mandibles in rapid, panicked patterns. The crystalline beings were flickering through colors that didn't exist in normal space. Several of the gaseous species had completely lost their form and were now just floating around as anxious clouds near the ceiling. Council military observer Zenkari, a usually composed species known for their logical approach to warfare, was openly weeping. Her tears were a strange blue color that pooled on the floor around her chair. Between sobs, she tried to explain what had pushed her over the edge. "It was the medical transmission," she managed to say between gasping breaths. "We were monitoring human military frequencies when we picked up their battlefield medic channel. There was this human called Doc Peterson. He was trapped in a bombed-out building with 6 wounded soldiers while Zelkari plasma fire was raining down all around them." Lisa nodded encouragingly, like a therapist listening to a patient work through their problems. "Any rational being would have called for immediate evacuation," Zenkari continued, her voice breaking. "The tactical situation was hopeless. The wounded couldn't be moved safely. Standard military doctrine in every civilized species calls for strategic withdrawal to preserve medical personnel for future operations. But Doc Peterson didn't follow standard doctrine, Lisa observed quietly. He started telling jokes, Zenkari whispered, as if the words themselves were dangerous. While explosions were going off outside, while the building was literally falling down around them, he was making his patients laugh. He told them stories about his hometown, shared pictures of his family, and kept checking their wounds like they were in a peaceful hospital instead of a war zone. Other council members were nodding along, recognition and horror on their faces. They had all heard the same transmission. The worst part, Zenkari said, her voice barely audible, was that he kept talking to them even as the building collapsed. His last transmission was him singing some kind of human lullaby to calm a dying soldier. My analysis team has been in counseling ever since. 3 of them have requested permanent transfer to botanical research. Across the room, the main viewing screen flickered to life, showing what had become the most disturbing piece of human military footage the council had ever recorded. General Rick Thompson appeared on screen, his uniform torn and his face covered in soot, standing on the bridge of what was obviously a doomed spacecraft. The transmission was crystal clear, and every word hit the alien observers like a physical blow. This is General Thompson to all human forces. We've lost main power, life support is failing, and we've got maybe 5 minutes before this whole ship comes apart. I want everyone to know it's been an honor serving with you. Thompson's voice was steady, almost cheerful, as he delivered what everyone knew was his final message. Nancy, if you're listening, I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Kids, be brave, study hard, and remember that sometimes grown-ups have to do difficult things to keep the people they love safe. Then his tone shifted, becoming almost conversational as he addressed the enemy. And to any Zelkari commanders listening in, you've got exactly 5 minutes to surrender before we ram every damaged ship we have straight into your home fleet. We're not doing this because we hate you. We're doing it because it's Tuesday, and we're all out of coffee. Thompson turned to someone off-screen. Mitchell, fire up the sound system. Let's give our friends a proper send-off. Play the Battle Hymn of the Republic on all frequencies. And crank it up loud enough for God to hear. The last few seconds of the transmission showed Thompson and his crew singing along to the music as their ship accelerated toward the enemy fleet. They were smiling. War scholar Tyxne had been found in her quarters 6 hours after that transmission ended. Her research staff discovered her sitting on her sleeping platform, clutching a bottle of fermented algae wine that was normally reserved for major celebrations. She was staring at the wall and mumbling mathematical equations mixed with what sounded like poetry. The probability curves don't account for beauty, she kept repeating. How do you calculate the tactical value of hope? What's the strategic benefit of singing while you die? The mathematics of madness, the mathematics of madness. Her doctoral thesis on human warfare tactics had started as a standard military analysis. By the time her staff found her, it had devolved into what looked more like abstract philosophy mixed with horror poetry. The Zelkari military observer, General Vexkorn, hadn't spoken coherently in 3 days. He just sat in his chair, slowly rocking back and forth while staring at something only he could see. Occasionally, he would whisper the same phrase over and over again, they trained dolphins. Why dolphins? What kind of species weaponizes dolphins? When pressed for details, he would just shake his head and mutter about aquatic mammals with explosive devices and the strategic implications of marine mammal warfare. The Council's best xenopsychologists were still trying to figure out what the humans had actually done to break his mind so completely. Ambassador Lisa Reynolds looked around the room at all the traumatized alien representatives and felt something that might have been sympathy. These beings had spent their entire careers studying civilized warfare between rational species. They simply weren't equipped to handle humanity's approach to conflict resolution. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored non-binary delegates, she said softly, I think we need to talk about what happens next. The final battle of what historians would later call the Sanity War took place in the Centauri system, among the scattered debris of 3 months of increasingly bizarre combat. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Last Resort, surveying what remained of humanity's fighting force. 37 ships, most of them held together by emergency welds, prayer, and what his engineering chief insisted on calling aggressive optimism. The Zelkari had brought their remaining fleet here for what they assumed would be the final confrontation. 200 pristine warships arranged in perfect battle formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor plating and sophisticated weapon systems. They looked professional, intimidating, and absolutely confident in their technological superiority. Jake's fleet looked like it had been assembled at a junkyard sale. The Last Resort itself was missing half its outer hull plating, revealing a maze of exposed wiring and jury-rigged systems underneath. The ship next to them, the Probably Fine, was literally held together with industrial-grade duct tape and what appeared to be welded-on pieces of other destroyed vessels. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Commander Bobby Chen from the communications station, "we're getting surrender demands from the Zelkari flagship. They're offering us honorable captivity and civilized treatment according to galactic law." Jake laughed, a sound that had lost all traces of humor weeks ago. "Bobby, open a channel to the entire Zelkari fleet. All frequencies, maximum broadcast power." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They'd been with Jake through 3 months of impossible battles, and they recognized that tone in his voice. It was the same tone he'd used right before they'd turned an ice cream truck into a guided missile, or when they'd convinced the enemy that Earth's disco music was some kind of psychological warfare weapon. "Channel open, sir." Jake straightened his torn uniform and looked directly into the camera. Behind him, his bridge crew went about their duties with the casual efficiency of people who had long since accepted that they were all probably going to die in the next few minutes. "Attention Zelkari forces, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. I want to thank you all for coming out today for what I'm sure will be a memorable battle." On the Zelkari flagship, Admiral Kexthal watched the human transmission with growing unease. Something about the human commander's tone was deeply unsettling. He sounded almost cheerful. "Now, I know what you're thinking," Jake continued conversationally. "You've got 200 shiny new warships, and we've got 37 vessels that look like they were assembled by a committee of caffeinated college students. You probably think this is going to be easy." Jake's smile grew wider, and several Zelkari officers involuntarily took a step back from their viewing screens. "Here's the thing though. We've got 37 ships held together with duct tape, spite, and what my chief engineer calls the power of positive thinking. Our crews are running on nothing but coffee, stubbornness, and the kind of desperate creativity that comes from having absolutely nothing left to lose." Captain Amy Wright, commander of the badly damaged cruiser Defiant Optimism, appeared on a split screen next to Jake. Her ship was missing its entire port side, and there was smoke drifting across her bridge, but she was grinning like she'd just been invited to the galaxy's best party. "Admiral Morrison is being modest," she said cheerfully. "We've also got crews who haven't slept in 72 hours, a medical officer who's been performing surgery with kitchen utensils, and a navigation computer that we taught to play jazz music while calculating attack vectors." Jake nodded approvingly. "Now, normally in this situation, we'd try to fight you ship to ship, maybe attempt some clever tactical maneuvers, possibly even negotiate for better terms. But you know what? We're tired, we're running low on everything except determination, and frankly, we're all getting a little bit crazy." The transmission paused for a moment as Jake consulted something off-screen. When he looked back up, his expression had shifted into something that made even his own crew slightly nervous. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ram every single one of our ships straight into your fleet. Not because we hate you personally, you seem like decent folks, all things considered, but because our reactors are already failing, and we're genuinely concerned that the radiation poisoning might make you suffer unnecessarily." Several Zelkari commanders started making distressed noises over their communication channels. "But wait," Amy Wright added with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a special bonus offer, "there's more. We've loaded our navigation computers with copies of every human military manual we could find. Sun Tzu's Art of War, Clausewitz's Theories on Strategy, Modern Urban Warfare Tactics, Guerrilla Fighting Techniques, and a really interesting book about psychological operations that includes a chapter on weaponizing music. Consider it our gift to galactic civilization, Jake concluded. When our ships crash into yours, all that information is going to scatter across the debris field. Think of it as a very explosive educational opportunity. The camera pulled back to show the entire human fleet beginning to move forward in what could generously be called a formation. Ships that should have been in dry dock for months were accelerating toward the Zelkari forces, their engines leaving trails of sparks and what appeared to be pieces of hull plating. On the Zelkari flagship, Admiral Kexthul stared at the approaching human vessels in complete bewilderment. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that announced their intention to commit mass suicide while simultaneously offering to share their military secrets with the people they were about to ram. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "what are our orders?" Kexthul watched as the human ships continued their suicidal charge, their crews apparently singing some kind of battle hymn that was being broadcast on all frequencies. The lyrics seemed to involve something about going down in a blaze of glory and taking everyone with us. 17 minutes later, the Zelkari fleet surrendered. The aftermath of the war moved with shocking speed. Within hours of the Zelkari surrender, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session that lasted exactly 43 minutes, the shortest major diplomatic proceeding in recorded galactic history. The vote to grant humanity full council membership with complete military autonomy was unanimous, 47 votes in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. Council Speaker Mordun, who had been receiving therapy for what his species classified as acute existential anxiety disorder, delivered the final statement from his hospital bed via video link. "We hereby grant humanity full membership status in the Galactic Council," he announced, his voice only shaking slightly. "We also respectfully request that they never, ever use their military expertise against fellow council members. Additionally, we would like to formally apologize to any species we may have previously described as barbaric or uncivilized. We clearly had no idea what those words actually meant." Dr. Kevin Thompson, Earth's military advisor, cheerfully offered to establish a cultural exchange program between Earth and the other council species. The program would begin, he suggested, with sharing humanity's complete military history library, including detailed tactical manuals, strategic planning guides, and what he described as some really interesting case studies in creative problem solving. All 47 council species declined the offer simultaneously.